I am building a twin turbo 4-wheel drive drag and drive truck entirely, or mostly technically, from junkyard parts. And my goal is to fire this thing up before the end of the year. Today for me it's the 13th of November, which means there's like 6 weeks left, which should be plenty of time to hear this thing run. But we have two major challenges that we need to overcome before this thing will actually fire up. Number one, plumbing, and number two, electrical. Now, what that means, the parts. We need a fuel system, so a pump, lines, regulator. We need electrical because the engine harness is non-existent or not attached at the moment. So a lot of work left to do. So naturally, I'm gonna start by taking the cab and the bed off the frame. So we're kind of moving backwards a few steps, but it'll make sense why in just a few moments. So let's jump right in and completely disassemble the scrapyard drag truck. It might seem kind of crazy or like a ton of extra work to pull the cab back off the frame at this point. But luckily, I haven't really connected a lot of things in between the cab and the frame. So it's basically the bolts, like 2 wires. Now, if you guys recall, this truck wasn't supposed to be a truck at all. It was initially just a 4-wheel drive frame conversion for the ugly truck. But I will never forget the day that we found the cab for this. It was on Marketplace. It was like $700. Like mint. Other than, I guess it did have some, we did have to fix some collision damage, but the cab was in great shape. So I'm glad this truck has formulated the way that it has. But if I had to do it all over again, I probably would be way better off if I just would have started, like, went out and bought a complete truck. There's a lot of extra steps when you're building stuff from the junkyard. I'm gonna interrupt myself real quick to remind you guys that you need to get entered to win the 2nd gen Cyclone. That's right, you've seen it on the channel over the last, gosh, year and a half, 2 years. I put a ton of work into this truck, and now I'm passing it along to you because, well, I've got a big project I'm in the middle of, and we need to keep the wheels turning. So it's time to let the 2nd gen Cyclone go. You probably know all about it, but my favorite part is under the hood. 5.3 LS, all-wheel drive, full-time all-wheel drive system, Corvette wheels, bright red wrap, and I can't do this very well one-handed, but my favorite part, the Harrop 2300 FDFI supercharger. This thing makes some awesome noises. As you will experience when it's yours, because I'm giving it away. Here's the deal. Head on over to tolmanperformance.com, grab some merch, and get entered to win. Every $5 that you spend is going to get you 1 entry into the 2nd gen Cyclone sweepstakes. It's a lot of fun. Don't miss out on it. Really easy to work on now. We're going to be running 10 AN fuel lines front to back, and we're going to be bending our own stainless hard lines for the brakes. So here's kind of what we are going to be working with. I went to Summit and I grabbed everything that I need. Because we're going to be running ethanol, we needed to get a good line that is compatible with ethanol. So we grabbed the PTFE hose in 10 AN. So that's 5/8 of an inch fuel line. I did grab some 6AN as well for the transmission cooler, but we'll talk about that plumbing later. So 10 AN and all the fittings that we will need. And then I got our regulator. We grabbed a flex fuel sensor block, which this is a kit you really need to check out. If you run flex fuel on anything that has a high fuel demand, you need one of these. This is a kit. It comes with the high flow flex fuel sensor mounting block. It comes with the sensor, and it comes with the electrical pigtail and all the ORB to AN adapters. And what this does, it splits the fuel flow, so half of it goes back here and half of it goes through the flex fuel sensor. And that's important because the flex fuel sensor is only 3/8 of an inch, where this now opens up so we have a massive amount of flow. So definitely check these out. I'll put some links down below in the description for you to check out. I also grabbed a 10 AN fuel filter. I think I showed you the regulator, and of course all of the hose ends that we will need. One more thing that I did grab was some bulkhead fittings. This is kind of how I'm going to run the lines. I want to future-proof this setup and allow for serviceability. And so basically I'm going to have terminations at the front and the back. So, well, here, I'll just show you. I made this tab, fell on the floor a second ago, has some bulkhead fittings on it, and we have a 10 AN on either side. This guy is going to get attached to the frame like right there if it doesn't move. And so we'll run the fuel lines along the frame rail here. We'll have the feed line is going to have its own little individual tab here that'll go down inside the frame where the filter and the flex fuel sensor will mount. That line will rejoin the frame in another bulkhead fitting right here. And the return line is just going to go kind of along the top of the frame rail here with the brake line and the chassis wiring. And then we're going to do the same thing as this, a dual bulkhead fitting at the back once we get the bed off. That way, because right now we're going to start the thing up with just a small in-tank fuel pump. But then whenever I switch to the big fuel pump, which will probably be like a Air Motive brushless 7 gallon a minute or 10 gallon a minute pump, I won't have to redo any of the fuel lines. I'll just go from that little bulkhead adapter, that last foot or two, to the big pump. That way I'm not redoing the whole setup front to back, where the fuel lines are going to be, you know, pretty well hidden on top of the frame rail. So that's the reason why it's so much easier just to pull the cab. So I spent a lot of time planning ahead and trying to make the most sense out of this, and I think this is the best path. So that's our bracket. We're going to weld it right here. I just wanted to take a second to look at it because I spent way too much time on these stupid things. And yes, I did cycle the wheel all the way and make sure that there's no way this or the proportioning valve are ever going to get in the way of a tire. So we don't want to cut a tire or damage a line. So I made this green line on the masking tape back when the cab was still on truck. I probably spent a whole day mapping out where everything would go. The next bracket we made is going to go right here, like that. That's where we're going to branch off the feed line to go through the filter and the flex fuel sensor. But there's a very, very close tolerance that we got to keep kind of in between where the line's going to come up here in the cab and all that good stuff. So just kind of mapped it out. You've heard of the age-old expression, measure 100 times, cut once. Oh, thought I felt something warm. A little bit of fire. Okay, quick detour for a frame modification. We have our 3 tabs welded on for our bulkhead fittings. That guy right there, one in the middle right there, and then finally the third one there. Like we mentioned, we're going to have the fuel filter in that little pocket. But anyway, for drive shaft clearance, I'm going to modify this cross member again, just because it's so much easier with the cab elevated off of the frame. I can only move it up about 7/8 of an inch till it touches the floor, but that's going to be just the ticket. I want to run a 5-inch drive line. And where it's at right now with the suspension fully cycling, it wouldn't hit, but it would, as far as I can tell, it would just almost touch. So we're gonna cut that right down the middle, raise it up a little bit, and weld it back in. And again, because right now the cab's off, this is the time to do it, where it would be so much more difficult later on. So we're going to preemptively modify that cross member. Any sawzall blades down here?
You want to redesign what?
I'm going to raise it up by 3/4 of an inch and weld it back in.
Raise up.
Yep. But look at this. See that?
Inside of
This is all they put rubber coating on the frames when they're brand new. They dip it. They'll put the frame on the assembly line. They dip it in this rubber stuff and it's hanging vertically. So on these back walls, you have all of this, like, look how thick that is.
it looks like a protector, like rust or something like that.
Yeah, it's just like a real thick, sticky. So we gotta get rid of that before we weld, but it'll stop it from rusting. All right, we're all cleaned up. I made a couple little inserts right here. They're gonna do two things. Number one, they're gonna take up the thickness of the material that was removed as part of cutting and trimming. And number two, they're just gonna reinforce the joint. So we'll get the weld started on here, on each side, put it back in the truck. We'll pull the frame back together because it popped out just a little bit and finish welded in place and move back to the fuel lines. Watch the tires, because you're going to have to go around the tires. So we're going to go straight back, and we're going to stand it up, but then I'm going to roll the frame back ahead. So I just want it kind of standing like right so the door can close.
This side is standing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Are we rolling? Yes, we are. Hold on, guys. I'm getting my fingers in here. And go. Doing all right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Set it down again for James. Maybe Chris could pop that frame around ahead. Wow. The last fuel line tab is going to mount right here inside my C-notch. I am going to pull the anti-roll bar and the fuel tank out of the truck just to give us a little more room to work. And some of this rust from like where I added this cross member, I'm going to just put a little bit of paint on some of it. But that's a slippery slope because once you start painting one thing, next thing you know, you get the whole truck blown apart and you're sandblasting the frame. Good. Thank you.
That's it?
Yep. All right, the shock mounts have 3 positions. I only need this one, and the hoses are going to be running one on top of the other through here. So I'm just going to cut off the excess, which will give us a little bit more room for activities. So we got the little bit of fab work done for now. Of course, there's always more to do, but now we're at the point where we can start building the frame sections of the fuel line. I can't build the lines yet from here up to the regulator because I haven't mounted it yet, and obviously I don't know like what length and what fittings, but My whole goal was to basically plumb the chassis and allow for serviceability. So let's say in the future I need to pull the cab off again, for example, when I eventually get around to painting this truck. All we'll have to do is disconnect like 2 brake lines here, 2 fuel lines here, and then the whole chassis will be able to stay plumbed. So I'm gonna have the feed on the inside, return, inside, outside for the return. This one will be uninterrupted, clear back to the bulkhead fitting here. And then the feed line on the bottom is gonna go over this cross member, top the frame, all the way, well, to here, where it'll branch off into the fuel filter and then into the flex fuel sensor and then rejoin up here on top of the frame. And then the brake line and wire harness are gonna run on the outside. The reason we have this bulkhead fitting back here, I kind of mentioned future-proofing stuff. Well, at first, we're gonna be running just a small 340 liter an hour electric in-tank fuel pump just to run the truck naturally aspirated. So we are going to branch off the bulkhead fitting there with a 6 AN instead of 10, and we'll just kind of run it. The tank or the pump's going to sit right about here, so a couple of short sections of line. And then whenever we upgrade to the big pump, which will be, like I said, a 7 or 10 gallon a minute pump, I'll probably mount that back here somewhere. But when that day comes, all I'll have to do is make a short line from the suction on the bottom of the fuel cell. That guy there, DB Rod's fuel cell, by the way. Make a short line from the suction to the pump, from the pump to the bulkhead, and then boom, we are in business. So I mentioned the PTFE fuel line that we're going to be using. Definitely check out Summit. They have great selection, good deals, and they can get you pretty much anything you need to plumb your chassis. And PTFE mainly is important because we're running ethanol fuel, which is really corrosive. And the PTFE has that plastic or polytetrafluoroethylene liner, whatever PTFE stands for. Anyway, let's start making some hoses. Okay, so this hose goes together fairly simply, in theory, but because it has the stainless braid on the outside, you gotta be careful because you will poke your fingers inevitably. And I always manage to get, the wire that goes under your fingernail, which, I can't stand that. Pain in my finger. Polytetrafluoroethylene. I know poly means many. Tetrafluoroethylene means plastic. So this is a many plastic hose. A synthetic fluoropolymer of tetrafluoroethylene and has numerous applications because it is chemically inert. There you go. All right, this tool I also picked up from Summit. It's made by Redhorse. This is a PTFE hose expander because once you put the ferrule on the outside, you kind of get a mold or expand the hose. And this little guy makes your life so much easier because you just jam it in. Okay, how many plastics can you name in 30 seconds? Polystyrene, polypropylene, polytetrafluoroethylene, high density polyethylene, polystyrene, did I say that? Nylon? I wonder if nylon is a trade name or if nylon is a technical name. Polyvinyl chloride. That's one. Get fences and windows out of that. And because I had a nerd moment while we were doing some editing, we missed 3. Acrylic polycarbonate and this one.
Acrylonitrile butadiene styrene.
All right, we're going to kind of hold the hose about where it's going to go. I'm going to have a couple of hold downs in between here and here. I want to follow the contour of the frame. It's going to meet out. There's a hose end installed here already, but disassembled. So I'm going to kind of run the hose where it needs to go. This is going to be a one-shot deal. Going to cut it on that mark and make our hose. It's like the perfect length right out of the box. So this is a high temp resistant heat shield because there's going to be exhaust and turbo things sort of close to these hoses. This tool is the most valuable thing that you can get if you're running PTFE lines. One hose. All right, guys, right now it's Saturday afternoon. It is almost 4 p.m. I'm supposed to be editing right now. In fact, the video, I don't know where this is gonna go, but my video is supposed to go live tomorrow morning, like 7 or 8 a.m. And I now got the crazy idea to open up a can of worms and paint some of this frame. Yeah, I normally hate painting, and this is why, because it's so hard to find a good place to stop. But here's what we're gonna do. We are going to basically just kind of wire wheel and paint the middle section of the frame where the cab is gonna go, because my goal after I'm done plumbing, get the cab back on. And then a little bit later, I'll probably get the back half painted, but I gotta get the bumper off, gotta get the suspension off, because I don't know, like I said, I normally hate painting, and this is why I am so tempted just to leave it rusty, but here we go. A little while later with a wire brush, 2 of them, definitely operating over their intended speed, but I have most of the middle section cleaned up as good as I care to clean it up. Again, I hate painting. It's like, why am I even doing it at this point? But I guess the theory is we'll do little bits at a time. Like, we'll do the center part right now that's underneath the cab. Won't be able to do that later on, but I'll do the bed before that goes back together. And at some point when the engine comes out, we'll do a little bit more painting up here. I am gonna paint just around this stuff here where the core support sits on top of, so don't ask me why I'm doing this, guys, but it'll look a little better. If you guys know me, you know that I have a love-hate relationship with paint. Actually, you probably are under the impression that I hate painting stuff, which is 80 to 85% true. And the main reason is just because I'm OCD. I really love stuff to be 100% perfect, and I don't have the patience or the skill set to do a perfect paint job. But the rusty frame was bugging me, and I figure it's worth the effort for now. Long term, my whole goal for this project was to someday have a powder coated chassis. But I don't want to go do that right now because there's still a fair amount of fabrication and cutting and grinding and welding and drilling that has to happen on the frame, especially on the back half. So to me, that would completely ruin the job if I went ahead and powder coated stuff and then had to grind on that. So this is a sort of temporary measure. If and when, which I'll say when, I do paint the truck, it's gonna be arrival blue. I wanna do a body off paint job just like this. And then at that point, I will sandblast and powder coat the frame, but not until, of course, all of the bugs are worked out, all of the fab work is done. And I wanna race this thing for a couple of seasons before that day comes. So that's why we are doing things the way that we're doing. I suppose if the day comes where I don't powder coat the chassis, better than nothing. Someday I could pull the engine out because we're gonna put a different one in it. At that point, I could paint the rest of the front of the frame. Next week, what we're gonna do is we're gonna finalize the routing of the brake lines and the fuel lines. We'll put the cab back on the frame. And then I will go ahead and tackle the back half. I'll pull the suspension out, and then I'll just do a little bit more sanding, wire wheeling, and painting. That way, at least from the firewall back, the whole entire cab is this semi-gloss, or actually this is flat black. I don't normally love flat black, but it looks okay. And I also did, for what it's worth, paint up here, just because where the core support goes, that would be covered up, and at least I painted everything that would be inaccessible with the cab back on. It's late, it's Saturday, 5:30 p.m. I gotta go home and edit this video that you guys have just watched, so I will end things here and say thank you for watching. I am glad I did it, just kind of looking at it here. Yeah, better than nothing. Final reminder for this video, don't forget to get entered to win the second gen Cyclone. It's supercharged, it's V8 swapped, it's all-wheel drive, and it can be yours. Don't worry, it stayed inside. The painting happened outside, so still looking minty fresh. Oh, it's so much fun. So don't forget to get entered to win. Every $5 at TolmanPerformance.com will get you one entry into the sweepstakes. It ends in December. We got a little bit of time, but don't forget to get entered to win. Thank you guys. I'm gonna go home, get showered, do some editing, and go to bed.